Ain't nobody tells you how small you become when you stand at the feet of something that old, that cruel, that utterly indifferent. The tent walls shake and moan like something dying slow, and inside a man huddles against a cold that seeps into his very bones. Frost creeps across the canvas ceiling while he shivers there alone, waiting for a dawn that might never warm him proper again. Some folks come to these mountains carrying fancy gear and big dreams, but the mountain don't care none about your money or your name. That new red suit ain't been tested by nothing yet, and the ice axe gleams like it never knew the bite of real fear. He stands there adjusting his equipment all awkward-like, not knowing that these peaks have swallowed up men far more experienced than himself. One figure watches another disappear into the white mist, and there ain't a single word that could fill that terrible growing silence. The gray swallows him whole, step by step into the storm, and the one left behind knows deep down he might never see him again. News from the world below arrives on frozen paper, but up here them words mean less than the wind tearing at your soul. The letter flaps and tears in his grip, while dark clouds gather overhead, bringing tidings of a war that feels impossibly far away now. 4 figures stand together on that glacier like 10 soldiers, posing for a photograph that might well become their only lasting memorial. The camera clicks once, capturing souls who don't yet know the price this mountain will demand from each and every one of them. He balances on a ridge no wider than a boot sole, looking down into an abyss that has no bottom he can see. The rope in his hands is the only thing between living and dying, and Lord knows that ain't much comfort up here at all. One slip on blue ice sends a man sliding toward oblivion until the safety line jerks tight and saves what the mountain tried taking. His crampons scratch desperate against the frozen slope while loose snow cascades past him into that hungry darkness waiting far below somewhere. 3 souls roped together wade through snow up to their waists, each step a battle against exhaustion that threatens to claim them all. The blizzard howls sideways across their bowed heads as they march into white nothing, trusting the rope to keep them bound together. A gold pocket watch ticks steady in a mittened hand, carrying memories of a life that seems like some other man's dream now. The face reflects on that glass surface, blank and smooth, while snowflakes land gentle on a treasure that means nothing to this mountain. The sled drags heavy across the glacier, its red cross faded by sun and wind from all those years of hauling broken men home. Every step forward costs more than the last, but he keeps pulling because that's what you do when folks are counting on you. 4 identical figures march along the ridge like soldiers heading into battle, their ice axes held high against shoulders like old cavalry rifles. The mountain don't care if you came here for glory or duty or escape. It takes what it wants and leaves what it pleases. Maps and plans spread across frozen knees while a man sits slumped on crates, wondering how things got so complicated and so cold. The administrative work of dying is tedious business, and someone has to account for every rope and ration before the final push begins. Base camp sprawls across the glacier like a wound, temporary shelters clinging to ice that don't want nothing human resting upon its surface. Men move between canvas walls, carrying burdens heavier than any pack, knowing that some of them won't ever walk back down this way. The porter sets down his load and stares up at the impossible summit, wondering what madness drives these foreign men to chase such frozen death. He has carried their dreams on his back across crevasses and ice falls, asking for nothing but the wages promised and safe passage home. 2 figures argue in the swirling snow, their gestures sharp and angry, while the mountain watches with the patience of something eternally ancient and unmoved. Words get lost in the wind up here, but the meaning carries clear enough when men disagree about which path leads to living or dying. The rope bridge sways above a chasm so deep the bottom lives only in nightmares, and one soul crosses with faith in fraying fibers. Each step sends trembles through the lines while the void beneath whispers promises of a fall that would last longer than any scream. Night falls hard and fast at altitude, turning the world into shades of blue and black that swallow everything warm and familiar whole. The lantern flickers inside the tent, casting shadows on faces that have aged 10 years in the span of just 2 brutal weeks. Someone coughs in the darkness, a wet and ragged sound that speaks of lungs struggling to find purchase in this thin and bitter air. The oxygen bottles sit stacked like promises, But there ain't never enough breath to go around when the mountain starts collecting what it's owed. He writes in his journal by candlelight, recording thoughts that might become the last words his family ever receives from his frozen hand. The pencil moves slow across the page, each letter a small act of defiance against the silence that wants to erase him completely. Morning comes gray and cruel, revealing a landscape that shifted overnight like the mountain was rearranging itself to confuse the souls who dare climb. Fresh avalanche debris blocks the route they marked yesterday, and now new decisions must be made with tired minds and trembling, cold-numbed hands. The Sherpa points toward an alternate path, his knowledge of these peaks worth more than all the fancy equipment money could ever buy. He reads the mountain like scripture, understanding warnings written in snow and ice that foreign eyes pass over without ever truly seeing. A fixed rope dangles from the rock face above, placed by hands that might already be frozen somewhere higher up this cursed slope. The climb begins again at first light, muscles screaming protest while minds focus on nothing but the next handhold and the next breath. Clouds roll in from the valley below, swallowing the lower camps until it feels like the whole world has simply ceased to exist. Up here, there ain't no down anymore, just white in every direction and the faint hope that memory can guide them through the nothing. The radio crackles with static and fragments of voices from base camp, words breaking apart like ice calving from a glacier into cold water. Communication becomes guesswork and faith when the weather turns mean, and men make choices based on silence as much as any clear signal. He adjusts his goggles against the blinding glare, knowing that snow blindness waits patient for any moment of carelessness or simple exhaustion up here. The sun reflects off a billion ice crystals with a beauty that could kill you dead if you stared at it too long. Frostbite has claimed the tips of 2 fingers now, turning flesh into something foreign and black that don't belong to him no more. He hides the damage from the others, knowing that weakness shown becomes weakness shared, and this team cannot afford another burden to carry. The cache of supplies lies buried beneath fresh snowfall somewhere ahead, and finding it means the difference between pushing forward and turning back forever. Men dig with hands and axes, searching for provisions that might already be lost to the mountain's endless appetite for everything humans bring. A shout rises up when someone strikes canvas beneath the white, and for one brief moment, hope flares like a match in darkness. They divide the rations carefully, each man taking only his share, because up here fairness is the only law that keeps men from becoming beasts. The summit looms above like a promise written in ice and stone, close enough to touch in dreams, but still days of suffering away. Every man here has pictured himself standing on that peak, planting a flag in snow that no human boot has ever pressed before. But the mountain keeps its crown guarded by walls of wind and cold that turn ambition into ash and brave men into frozen memories.
Can you hear?
He sits alone at the edge of camp, staring at nothing while his mind wanders back to a home that feels like ancient history. There was a woman once, and a porch, and the smell of coffee in the morning, but all that belongs to some other man now. The altitude steals more than breath from a man. It takes pieces of who he was and scatters them across the uncaring snow. 2 climbers share a tent meant for one, their bodies pressed close for warmth while the temperature outside drops to numbers that kill quick. Neither speaks because words cost energy that cannot be spared, so they communicate in gestures and grunts like men reverting to something primitive. The stove sputters and dies, fuel running low, and now hot water becomes a luxury that must be rationed like everything else up here. He melts snow in his mouth, feeling the cold spread through his chest like fingers reaching for his heart with slow and patient intent. The weather window everyone prayed for finally arrives, bringing clear skies that feel like a gift from something that usually only takes. Men scramble to prepare for the push, checking gear with hands that shake from excitement as much as from the relentless bitter cold. This is the chance they crossed oceans and continents for the moment when all the suffering either pays off or amounts to nothing at all. The line of climbers stretches up the face like ants ascending a wall of white, each figure smaller than the last against the immensity. From below, they look like nothing at all, just specks of color, swallowed by a landscape that reduces human endeavor to absolute insignificance and silence. He drives his ice axe into the slope and pulls himself higher, muscles burning with a fire that barely keeps the creeping cold away. Each swing is a conversation with the mountain, asking permission to climb just a little farther before the answer comes back as no. The rope tugs at his waist, reminding him that others depend on his strength just as he depends on theirs for dear life. They move as one creature now, bound together by hemp and desperation, a chain of souls linked against the void that hungers below. A serac looms overhead like a frozen wave caught mid-break, tons of ice waiting for the moment gravity decides to finish its ancient work. He passes beneath it quick as tired legs allow, not looking up because seeing the danger won't change a damn thing about his path. The mountain makes its own schedule for destruction, and a man can only hope today ain't the day it decides to come crashing down. Camp 4 sits perched on a ledge barely wide enough for 2 tents, carved from ice by hands that ached with every desperate swing. This is the last stop before the summit push, the place where men rest knowing sleep might not come no matter how hard they try. The view from here would steal your breath even if the thin air hadn't already claimed it for its own keeping long ago. Peaks stretch to every horizon like teeth in some enormous jaw, and the world below has disappeared beneath a sea of white cloud. He eats cold rations that taste like nothing, forcing calories down a throat that has forgotten what hunger feels like after so many days. The body becomes a machine up here, something to be maintained and monitored rather than inhabited, a vehicle for will and nothing more than that. Midnight arrives with stars so bright and close they seem like holes punched through black velvet, letting light from somewhere else shine cold through. He lies awake listening to the mountain breathe, its groans and cracks, speaking a language older than any words humans have ever learned to say. The summit team assembles in darkness, headlamps casting weak circles of light against a cold that feels alive and hungry for warm flesh. 3 men have been chosen for the final push while the others wait below, each role assigned by calculation and the brutal math of survival. He checks his oxygen apparatus one last time, knowing that the difference between triumph and tragedy often hides in the smallest mechanical failures. The hiss of bottled air sounds like a whispered prayer, a thin thread connecting him to life in a place where life ain't welcome. They begin the climb before dawn paints the peaks pink, moving through blue darkness toward a goal that has consumed months of planning and pain. Each step upward costs more than the last, the body's reserves draining away like water through cracked earth in a summer drought back home. He focuses on the boots ahead of him, letting rhythm replace thought because thinking too much up here leads to mistakes that end in dying. The slope steepens into something that ain't quite vertical but feels like climbing the wall of the world toward heaven's locked back door. Ice crystals form on his eyelashes, freezing them together until he has to stop and clear his vision with fingers that barely feel anymore. The sun rises behind the mountain, turning the snow into fields of gold and crimson that would be beautiful if beauty mattered right now at all. Halfway to the summit, one man stops and cannot continue, his body finally refusing orders that his mind keeps desperately trying to give it. They leave him with oxygen and a promise to return, knowing that promises made on mountains are the easiest kind to break without meaning to. 2 remain now, pushing upward through air so thin each breath feels like trying to drink from an empty cup that mocks your thirst. The summit ridge appears above them like a knife edge drawn against the sky, impossibly narrow and swept clean by winds that never stop howling. He crawls the final distance on hands and knees, dignity abandoned somewhere below in favor of simple, stubborn refusal to quit this close to glory. And then there is nowhere higher to climb, just a small platform of snow and ice where the world falls away in every direction. He stands on the summit of the savage mountain, the second highest point on earth, and feels nothing but the cold and a terrible emptiness. The view stretches forever across ranges and valleys and clouds, a panorama of creation that should fill a man's soul but somehow leaves it hollow. He plants no flag because the wind would tear it away before the photograph could capture proof, so he simply stands and bears witness instead. Minutes pass like hours up here where time moves different, stretched thin by altitude and the weight of knowing the descent might kill you yet. The other climber arrives, and they share a moment of triumph that tastes like ash and copper on tongues too frozen to form proper words. No celebration comes, just the urgent knowledge that every second spent on top is borrowed time that must be repaid with interest on the way down. They turn their backs on the summit and begin the descent, leaving footprints that the wind will erase before the next dawn breaks cold and pink. Going down should be easier, but exhaustion has rewritten the rules of gravity, and each step threatens to become a fall into white oblivion below. He finds the man they left behind still breathing but barely conscious, eyes vacant and staring at something none of the others can see there. They drag him between them now, three becoming one awkward creature stumbling down slopes that grow steeper with every passing hour of failing light and strength. The weather turns without warning, as it always does up here. Clouds swallowing the route markers and leaving them blind in swirling white, frozen chaos. Navigation becomes guesswork, guided by instinct and prayer, each decision carrying the weight of three lives that hang by threads of dwindling hope and luck. He thinks he sees a tent below through the maelstrom, a spot of color that might be salvation or might be his dying mind playing tricks. The shout that rises from his cracked lips is answered by figures emerging from the white, hands reaching out to grab them before the mountain can claim. They collapse into the tent like men pulled from drowning waters, gasping and shaking, while others strip away frozen layers to assess the damage done. Frostbite has painted its marks across faces and fingers, black and white patches that speak of flesh surrendered to the cold's relentless, hungry claim. The unconscious man breathes shallow and ragged, his body fighting battles that medical supplies at this altitude cannot hope to properly address or win. Someone heats water over a sputtering stove while others rub circulation back into limbs that have forgotten warmth exists anywhere in this frozen, cruel world. The radio crackles with voices from below, desperate questions about status and survival that cannot be answered with any certainty until morning reveals the full truth. He tries to speak, but words come out slurred and strange, his mind still wandering somewhere between the summit and this fragile canvas shelter below. Sleep takes him against his will, pulling him down into darkness deeper than any crevasse while his body attempts to repair what the mountain broke. Dreams come twisted and cold, filled with falling and the faces of men he knows are dead, though he cannot quite remember how or when. He wakes to gray light filtering through tent walls and the sound of wind still howling its eternal song across the frozen, desolate slopes outside. The man they carried down did not survive the night, his body finally surrendering the fight sometime in the darkest hours before reluctant dawn arrived. They wrap him in canvas and speak words that get stolen by the wind, a burial service conducted in a place no preacher ever imagined visiting. The mountain has taken its payment for letting them touch the summit, a toll that everyone knew might come due, but hoped somehow to avoid. He helps carry the body to a crevasse that will serve as grave eternal, a blue ice cathedral where no mourners will ever come to visit. The descent continues for those still breathing, each camp pass marking progress toward a world where warmth and safety exist as more than distant memory. Muscles that scream going up now tremble with exhaustion going down, the body spending reserves it cannot spare on a journey that must be completed. He looks back once at the summit, now hidden in clouds, wondering if standing there was worth the price already paid and yet to come. The fixed ropes show where that wasn't there weeks ago, frayed by weather and use until each handhold becomes an act of desperate, necessary faith. Another climber slips on ice and slides 30 feet before the rope catches, a reminder that the mountain keeps trying until you reach the bottom. They help him up with hands that shake from more than cold, eyes meeting in silent acknowledgement of how close another tragedy had just come. Base camp appears below like a mirage that slowly becomes real, tents and figures growing larger with each painful step down the moraine's rocky path. The welcome that greets them mixes joy and sorrow in equal measure, celebration of survival shadowed by the absence of one who won't return home. He sits on a crate and stares at nothing while others move around him with purpose, unable to process the transition from death zone to safety. Someone presses hot tea into his hands, and the warmth spreads through fingers that had forgotten sensation could be anything other than pain and numbness. The expedition doctor examines his frostbite with grim efficiency, marking which tissue might recover and which has already been claimed permanently by the cold's bite. 2 fingers on his left hand will never bend proper again, a permanent souvenir from the savage mountain that he'll carry until his last day. Reports must be written and telegrams sent to a world that waits hungry for news of triumph or tragedy from these remote and brutal heights. He struggles to find words that capture what happened up there, knowing that language fails when trying to describe experiences that exist beyond normal human comprehension. The summit was reached, the record set, but sitting here among the survivors, he cannot locate the pride that should accompany such a historic achievement. Others will call them heroes when they return to civilization, not understanding that heroism had nothing to do with choices made under duress and necessity. The mountain remains indifferent to their suffering and success alike, its peak catching the last light of day while camps below fall into cold shadow. Packing begins at first light, the systematic dismantling of a temporary world that held dreams and nightmares in equal measure for too many weeks. Tents come down and crates get sealed while men move through routines that keep hands busy and minds from wandering to places best left alone. The porters return from lower elevations, their faces showing relief that the foreign climbers have survived enough to pay the wages still owed them. He watches them work with an efficiency born of generations in these mountains. Knowledge passed down like heirlooms from fathers to sons across countless hard years. They understand something about this place that outsiders never truly grasp, a respect carved from coexistence rather than conquest or the hunger for glory. The Sherpa who guided them to the summit stands apart, eyes fixed on the peak that has been both his livelihood and his burden. He has climbed higher than any of the foreign expedition members, yet his name will appear as a footnote if it appears in the records at all. The injustice of it settles in the gut like a stone, but such thoughts are luxuries for those who must focus on survival first. Equipment gets sorted into piles of salvageable and ruined, the mountain having extracted its toll in gear as surely as it took in flesh and spirit. Ropes that held lives now show fraying that makes them worthless. Ice axes bear chips and cracks that speak of desperate moments on unforgiving stone walls. He picks up a glove that belonged to the man who died. A simple object now transformed into something sacred by absence and the weight of memory. Personal effects must be gathered and returned to families who wait in distant lands, clutching hope that grows thinner with each day of radio silence. The letters they will write cannot contain the truth of what happened here, cannot translate the language of wind and ice into words wives understand. So they will speak of bravery and noble sacrifice, constructing narratives that comfort the living while betraying the complicated reality of how men actually die. The caravan forms at the glacier's edge, a line of men and beasts beginning the long march back toward a world that has continued without them. He takes a final look at the mountain that changed him in ways he cannot yet name, its peak now clear against a sky of impossible blue. Somewhere up there, footprints are already disappearing beneath fresh snowfall, the mountain erasing evidence of their passage like it erases everything human in time. First day of walking feels strange after weeks of climbing, legs confused by flat ground and lungs drunk on air that actually fills them. Villages appear along the route like outposts of another existence, places where people live whole lives without ever looking up at the peaks with hunger. Children run alongside the caravan, curious about these weathered strangers who carry the smell of high places and the haunted eyes of survivors still processing. He tries to smile at them, but his face has forgotten how the muscles refusing commands from a mind still trapped somewhere above the clouds. Each night brings camp in meadows that feel impossibly lush after the sterile white world above. Grass and flowers assaulting senses numbed by ice and stone. Sleep comes easier at lower altitudes, but dreams remain troubled, replaying moments of crisis that the waking mind tries desperately to file away forever. He wakes gasping sometimes, convinced he is falling or that the tent is collapsing under snow that exists only in the prison of his memory. The others show similar signs of damage that no doctor can properly treat, wounds carried in the spirit rather than the flesh that slowly learn to hide. They speak less as the journey continues, each man retreating into private reckonings with what was gained and lost on the savage mountains' bitter slopes. The town appears finally after weeks of walking.
There is no good.
Civilization announcing itself with sounds and smells that feel foreign after so long in the wilderness above. Telegraph wires promise connection to a world that has been waiting for word. Families in newspapers hungry for stories of adventure and triumph over nature. He composes the message in his head, searching for phrases that convey success without revealing the hollow feeling that has replaced whatever drove him here initially. The summit was reached, the words will say, and men gave everything in pursuit of glory that now seems as distant as the peak itself. The ship waits in harbor to carry them home across waters that seem impossibly gentle after the violence of wind and ice they have survived. He stands at the rail watching the coastline shrink, knowing that part of him remains forever on that mountain, frozen into the snow and stone. The voyage passes in a haze of recovery and reflection, bodies healing while minds continue wrestling with experiences that resist being packed away into neat boxes. Other passengers look at them with curiosity and something like reverence, seeing heroes where the climbers themselves see only men who got lucky enough to survive. He avoids the questions when he can, offering short answers that satisfy without revealing the complicated truths that live beneath the simple story of conquest.
What
Home
went
appears
wrong?
on the horizon like a word half remembered from a language he used to speak fluently, but is somehow forgotten during his long absence. The dock crowds with reporters and family members, faces searching for loved ones among the weathered strangers who descend the gangway on unsteady, sea-weakened legs. Cameras flash and questions fly while he searches the crowd for eyes he knows, finding them finally and seeing the relief mixed with something like fear. She sees the change in him before words are spoken, recognizes that the man who left is not entirely the same man who has returned. The weeks that follow bring lectures and ceremonies, celebrations of achievement that require him to perform a version of triumph he does not truly feel inside. He tells the story so many times it becomes smooth and polished, worn like river stones until the sharp edges of truth get hidden completely away. But at night the mountain returns in dreams, its savage face rising above clouds while the wind speaks names of those who did not come home. Years pass and the expedition becomes history, reduced to photographs and records that capture facts while missing everything that actually mattered about those desperate frozen days. He grows old with the mountain still living inside him, a cold presence that never quite melts no matter how many summers come and go. The peak remains unconquered in the ways that matter, standing eternal while men who dared challenge it fade into dust and footnotes and legend forgotten. And the wind still howls across that savage summit, erasing all traces of human ambition beneath snow that falls, patient and white and forever and ever. The wind cuts across the ridge like a blade forged in some cold hell, and there stands a soul staring up at the savage mountain. K2 rises against that freezing sky, a tower of rock and ice that has broken better men than any of us down here.